I never imagined that I would be an author. The books that I've written were all because I was looking for a book. I was looking for a resource and I couldn't find it. And as you said, Smiley, when we don't see it, right, we make our own table. When we don't see the book, we create our own book. Like, we're not going to wait. Who are we waiting for?
Right. Welcome to another great episode of the Dre and Smiley podcast, The Inner Circle.
Dre, first and foremost, we have a person who served in our military. I want to thank you for your service, Analiza. And I just get so excited and humbled every time we get a military professional to come on our podcast. So I just want to kick it off by thanking you. And let me read your bio. We have Analiza Quiroz Wolf recently published The Myths of Success, a Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership, drawing on research-based practices and stories from women leaders of color from her podcast, Women of Color Rise. The book empowers women of color to ascend to the C-suite. It also provides strategies for allies and organizations to support women of color at work. A former nonprofit CEO and U.S. Air Force captain, Analiza now coaches diverse leaders, facilitates and consults with leadership teams, and leads an online Woman of Color Rise Next Level Leadership course. With that, welcome to the Dre and Smiley podcast, Analiza. Thank you.
Smiley. Thank you. Thank you.
If you can, first, we've had other military Air Force representatives. As a captain, if you can explain to our audience, what were your duties? What did you do did you fly a plane when you were in the Air Force? Or tell us about that particular part of your existence.
So when I was a captain, I served in Guam, and my job was to be kind of an ambassador for the Air Force to work specifically with China, Taiwan, and the Philippines. And back then I was pretty young and I'm Filipina. And so working with really high level generals and colonels from other air forces, they were really confused. They were looking at me wondering why I didn't look more like Britney Spears, blonde, blue-eyed. And I had to convince them first that I was American, I was a captain, and that I could represent our country. We could do some deals together. So that was my job, international relations, trying to get negotiations, bringing convenings together. How do we work together when we have a disaster? What would that plan look like? So that was my job.
That is so amazing. And when you were negotiating with disaster, so you weren't flying the planes, you were more on the relationship side of it. And I like the way you called it an ambassador. So you're like the Air Force ambassador to that part of the world, representing our concerns in the East or in Asia.
Look how we get things done. And it really is convenings. We bring high level leaders from across Asia together, and then we have mock trials. Okay, so there's a huge flood in Thailand, and the core of the country is now having to face this big issue. How do we support each other? How do we bring in air refueling? How do we set up camps? And so we actually go and simulate it. And so hopefully that doesn't happen. But when these crises do, we are prepared. And most importantly, we have the relationships.
Mm-hmm. And one last question before I turn it over to Andre is, when you entered the military, was that your goal? Was that like a childhood aspiration to go and serve your country and to be a part of this ambassador relationships, or did it just evolve into that as part of your journey?
So I am a military brat. My dad moved to the United States only because he wanted to serve in the country, in the Navy. And that was his ticket from moving to the Philippines to the United States. So I have to say that. And then second, being Filipino, we have this saying called utang na loob, which means literally debt from the inside. And so I have this feeling that I want to pay back my thanks for all the sacrifice of my parents, this country. And so I wanted to give back in a certain way. I had not envisioned the military, but it really was my dad who said, have you considered it? You are a leader, you have this track record. What about after college? You could serve in the military, and not the Navy, but the Air Force.
Love that. Love that. And so you shared your experience about building relationships, facing challenges, proving yourself, being a woman, that sort of thing, and people doubting, wait a second, you're a captain, you're a woman, having to kind of establish some credibility, et cetera, which seems like a great training ground for life outside of the military. So talk to us about that transition. So how many years did you spend in the military? And then talk to me about the transition to what you went to after the military, the role.
So I spent 5 years in the military, and that theme that you mentioned, Dre, of proving myself, that has been the theme. I'm 5'2", I'm brown, and a woman. And when I'm serving with men, people who are taller than me, older than me, and then having to come into a room and command presence and have some legitimacy, there's always already a roadblock. And that is pretty much consistent throughout my career. So I've had to learn to assess, who is this room and what do I need to say, do so that I can establish credibility. And so moving from the Air Force, I went to business school. I went to Northwestern and then moved into corporate. And then from there, moving into education. You would think that, okay, well, given my background, I went to Stanford, I've got this military background, people will just assume, right? I can lead, I'm smart. But I would walk into rooms and it was like, Analiza, can you take the notes? Or are you the person on the side, the assistant? Let me have you coordinate the schedule. And so I had to already know that there are stereotypes against me and then be able to establish credibility, walk into a room, make sure they're clear about who I am, stand up tall, exude presence, have all these, tell them, actually, I can present that. I've presented to generals, so I can definitely present to this group of principals. This is not a problem. And if there's feedback, please let me know. But I'm absolutely capable of that. So can I have the chance? And so having to stand up for myself constantly has been a theme.
Yeah, yeah. It's a theme that's clearly unfortunate. I imagine it can take its toll in some ways. People of color, have to endure that in some capacity throughout their lives. Um, it reminds me of the stories I've shared with my children about experiences I've had where, depending on how I present that day, I'm treated differently compared to if I'm wearing a sport coat, or if I just wear what the average person wears and walk down the street and walk into a room in corporate America. I have to do certain things, as you mentioned, to command presence, whether it's my volume, whether it's the word choice, whether it's the posture. It's these are all things that some people don't have to necessarily consider when they walk into a room or engage with people, because it just comes naturally for them because of they are of the majority population. So that knowledge that you've collected and the experiences that you've had, how have you leveraged that today to help others, right? Um, Overcome these challenges that they face. And if you have a success story, as you share that, please share that success story as well.
So what I thought originally was that I must be doing something wrong. There must be something wrong with me if I'm not able to succeed, if I'm not able to command the presence, convince people, rise up in the ranks. There must be something wrong with me. And I share the story that I remember having 3 jobs. And one job, I'm really good at operations, making things happen, fixing messes basically in organizations. I find a lot of clarity on how to get a strategy going, align teams, and then put together a plan and move us forward within a short amount of time. And with that skill, I often, and sometimes people are not as good at it, I end up getting more jobs. And so being a good Asian, I was happy to take on the jobs. I'm happy to do that, happy to do that. Oh, and that person isn't as capable. I'm happy to do part of their job and also part of their job. And so I'm doing this. They're saying, wow, what a great job you're doing, Analiza. Thank you so much. We're so happy you're here. And then promotions would come and I was so sure, with all this hard work, not just with many jobs and long hours and really good feedback, that I was for sure going to get promoted. So I set the reservations to celebrate with family to say, look, this is going to be my promotion dinner. It's, I've worked really hard over the years to get this. And come to find out when they announced the name, that was not me. And they announced it was a white male who was like 10 years my junior. And I could not believe it. He went up to the CEO and said, I'll see you Saturday, Sunday for golf. And I was like, What's going on? What is going on? And I came home and cried about it. And I could not believe it. I also couldn't believe this wasn't the first time, right? There was a sequence in these jobs where it wasn't how hard I worked or how many jobs I did or how many performance reviews I rocked on. There was something I was missing. And so that's what's guided my work, is that often we think we're alone. And this is like, a decade, 15 years of this kind of experience, that we're actually not. And if we realize that this is not a common, this is a common experience for people of color, that we're not alone, that there are things we can do to understand how the game is played, that we can actually advocate for ourselves and then get to the table and change the system. And so that's what this work is about. How do we play this game? How do we know what to do, who to know, make sure we advocate for ourselves, and then climb to that C-suite? So the success story is that that's what's happened. That's how I became CEO. That's how I've helped other people get to the C-suite. And things are changing.
Yeah. As you share your story, I'm having flashbacks of my time in corporate America where everything that you laid out, I've experienced or seen firsthand, where, you feel like you've worked hard, you're up for this opportunity, and someone else who is the nephew of the CEO or the brother of the director who knows so and so gets hired in place of the most qualified person. I remember there were times when, hiring my staff, the name on a resume, so it would go through my CEO. So, the resumes would come in and we'd kind of discuss and, who looks like the best qualified. And this as well as I do. In a matter of seconds, resumes, come across desks and decisions are made whether or not we want to bring them in. And just because of the name of someone, just the name, right? Because it's ethnic, that sort of thing, they'll be turned away. And it's not fair, but you raised a good point. Understanding the game is, because that's what it is, how to play it and how to navigate the system, right? How to navigate the system and realize that it's not you that's the problem, is what I hear you saying. It's not you that's the problem. It's understanding the dynamics of the structure. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. It took me back for a minute. Smiley, I'll pass it back over to you.
Well, I think everyone listening of color in corporate America, you're touching hotspots or things that they've experienced, and I think it's amazing that you're pulling it all together and making it a podcast or something that you can identify, so therefore you can address it. Because when you were speaking, I remember I was working in the pharmaceutical sales software business, and I was talking to Dre before we got on the call. In February, I was 228 pounds. I'm down to like 207 now. I'm excited about that. But back then, when I was doing this software for pharmaceuticals, I was maybe 160 wet. I was really skinny and tall, like 5'10", 5'11". But when I got up to about 210, 220, and I'm going to these meetings, this is in like 2024, 2014, 2015. I go into the visit a prospect. A few people would come in the door thinking I'm the security guard. and at first I was so happy. I tell you about my weight because I was so impressed that someone thought I was big enough to be the security guard. And then my colleague, who was he was a white guy, was like, he was getting upset. Like, why do they think you're the security guard? I was like, dude, I'm so happy that someone thinks I'm big enough to be a security guard. So it didn't even faze me. But then other things we would do is you go out and they think you're looking for a job. And I'm like, who looks for a job by showing up at your office after 2010? Everything's online. And So it's just so many incidents that occur when you're just in the world, just trying to exist in corporate America. And I think it's amazing that you're dealing with that. So one question I have for you is, because let's say after you went to Northwestern and Stanford, and I saw Harvard in there as well, what would you say to a young Annalisa who's a brown woman, a woman of color, but she's 5'2" and she's 25 and she's trying to climb that ladder? So what would you say to yourself, knowing what you know now, if you could talk to you back then and say, no, it's don't plan that party, or plan the party because you did good work and you're just going to have to get to the table another way? What would you say?
I would say that there's a game. And the way that
Mm-hmm.
this game is played is that they will make you feel small and unworthy, and
Mm-hmm.
that they will human capital use you for all the things that you can give, and then that it likely won't be rewarded. But that's not going to happen with you, because you will know that you're a badass right away, and you will go find other women of color, people of color who are more in the path ahead of you, and you will seek mentorship and, more importantly, sponsorship. Get advice, become friends, infiltrate into the system, and then you'll rise to the top quickly. And then you'll build your own organization where it's much more fair, about love, about equity, and real impact. So there might be some tears, but know that you are okay. We will get through this. I'm with you. You're awesome.
I feel
And when you
inspired. I'm ready to take on the world.
that
I
was
love
such a
that. I
clip.
love that.
It is. You are a badass, and I can't wait for that Instagram clip to come out, because that is so apropos for what young people. Because Dre and I both have daughters, and they're daughters of color, getting ready to, excited about going to college, excited about entering corporate America. And it's going to be with people like you who are the trendsetters, and they can look towards your podcast, look towards your books, your experiences, and now they can learn the game from someone who experienced it. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal. But tell me this, as a compare and contrast, you rose up through the ranks in the military, and then you were in corporate America. What was easier, harder, or was it similar, different, or would you say, because I would think in the military, it's merit based. You do something, you rise. I mean, my understanding, I've never been there, but just listening to my brother who was in the military. But in corporate America, it's more, I read something that said people of color are promoted on experience, but non-people of color are promoted on potential. So it was a little more succinct than what I read, but comments on those two compared to U.S. or the military to corporate America, and then the potential versus experience.
I love this question because sometimes I think the military gets a hard knock. I remember when I went to Northwestern and I was applying for jobs, and they said to me, "Oh, you were in the military. Well, what were you doing in there? Like crawling in dirt? Ha ha ha." And I was like, wow. I was meeting with generals and I was putting together like $1 billion projects. And I walked into a room and people thought I was a subject matter expert for an incredibly technical aircraft. And people in the business sometimes often don't value or see the incredible leadership and training that not just me, but the military provides. So for
Mm-hmm.
the things that military can get better and some problematic things about it, it's an incredible training ground. It's an incredible training ground. And remember that I've gone to like very prestigious places, fellowships, corporate training programs. And I would say that hands down, the military knows how to train leaders across the board, regardless of race or gender. They are about producing incredible leaders. And so it is fantastic. More organizations need to replicate that kind of model. And it's one of the reasons I was in education. You have a principal who goes, we'll call it down, leaves the organization, and the whole school feels it. Military, that doesn't happen. I mean, someone goes down, we got to keep operating. And so it's beautiful. I want to start there because I was so shocked when I got to corporate world, and these are highly coveted jobs to get a marketing job out of Kellogg Northwestern School, or to get like this prestigious education job that's hard to get. And yet the merit, so shockingly, it wasn't about merit. It wasn't about doing a great job and working really hard and showing results. It was about who you knew and making sure that they could advocate for you. And so I would say you're right, Smiley, that the military is so much more like about advocating for people and helping you rise. If you are strong, you still have to know the right people. I happen to know some amazing people who are in my life today still after a couple decades, people I invited to my wedding. They, at the get-go, when I was a second lieutenant driving from California to Texas on my first assignment, met me and said, welcome, come to my home, meet my family, come to the barbecue. You are my daughter. I want to help you be a colonel, a captain, a general, whatever you want in life. And I was like, I just met you. Like, what is going on here? It is the culture. It is the culture of care. It is meant to help all of us. And yes, I want to say that this is not all the cases, but for me personally, this was constant. Every job I had in the military, people looked out for me. People cared. People still reach out to me today, including your brother. So where does this happen? I haven't seen it. And so, yeah, the military is much more merit-based, in my opinion.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, what that speaks to, Analiza, is the importance of having a network, a support group, right? And so one of your, I imagine, many support groups is the military. And that clearly has contributed to your success. Let's talk about the podcast you have. You have a podcast called Women of Color Rise. Tell me about what inspired you to create that, and what do you hope to achieve through having it?
So when I was in my 20s, I wanted to know how to change the world. It was so idealistic. I still have those dreams, but I was really in the get-go of how can I be a leader. I experienced a lot of both joy, but some hardship growing up in a low-income neighborhood with gangs, with guns in San Diego. And I wanted to have good schools for kids. I wanted to have models for kids. I wanted opportunities for kids. And so that the hope was that I could do something about it and learn. And even with books and trying to find people who looked like me, who were people of color, women of color, I couldn't find them. So I would find white mentors and ask for advice, try to build relationships. And as I went through my career, it just kept happening. I tried to find a person of color to work for, a woman of color to work for. This was not that long ago, and I could not find any. I thought to myself, how is this possible? We're in the 2020s and I cannot find someone to work for. And that's when someone said to me, well, you should be the person. I was like, I don't want to be the CEO. I want to be a support. Like, I'm a helper. And they said, if you want to do the work to open doors, you need to be a face. That is part of the work. Step into that leadership role. You can do all the job. You just need to step into it. And so to hear someone say that, to say that that's part of the work, that's the reason that I took a CEO job. And that's also the reason I started this podcast, is because we need to see people who look like us. We need to know that other people have come before us. It's not a concrete ceiling. They say that women of color, it's not a glass ceiling. It's actually concrete, because you can't even see past the ceiling. And so we're trying to say, look, there are many, many C-suite women of color, and they have faced a lot of challenges, including not wanting to be CEO. And so can you imagine, for you, women of color in your 20s and 30s, you can learn from these women and have their stories here for you to show that you can overcome them. Hopefully have some cheat codes. We don't have to cry so much to learn, get the battle scars, learn from them, and then move past. And so that's the whole reason for the Women of Color Rise podcast. How do we uplift these stories and know that it's the power of the community that will get us through?
I think that is so succinctly expressed, because what I deduce from what you just said is, instead of being at someone else's table, you created your own table where you're the CEO. So you could be that beacon of light for all the others, because you couldn't find anyone to work for, which meant you would have been on their table. So you just created your own table. Would that be a fair assessment?
I want to say that for me, I became a CEO of a charter network here in New York City. And then after that, I created my own company, Women of Color Rise. And that is actually a pretty similar story that we find with many women of color, is that we try to rise up in the ranks. And sometimes the company, as much as they talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, they don't really mean it. So, facing all of these obstacles, a lot of women of color have just said, well, you know what? I'm out. I'm going to start my own nonprofit. I'm going to start my own company. And you're seeing a ton of really great creativity. And that's one of the reasons is I can't find it here. So I'm going to make my own. I'm going to create my own table.
So if you had the magic genie and money was no object, resources were no objects, I mean, you could just have whatever it is, what would be that silver bullet that would help affect and influence a lot of women who was, let's say, not just women, because Dre and I are two dudes and we experience many of the things you talked about. So what would be that silver bullet thing that you would like to implement in life that would just make it so things would just be better for the next generation or two?
So my
No option. Mm-hmm.
magic bullet, if I could wave it, is foundational to mindset. This is something that I've experienced myself. This is something that I've experienced with coaching clients, facilitating groups, doing professional development throughout my entire career. And that is, I would change the mindset. I am not worthy to, I am the bomb. I am awesome. I have so many freaking gifts. Watch me roar.
Love
Oh, I
that.
love it. I love it.
Love it. So, in addition to the podcast, you're an author. You have a number of books out. I believe your most recent book is The Myths of Success: A Woman of Color's Guide to Leadership. That is your most recent? Am I correct about that? Okay, so tell me what inspired you to write this book, and what do you hope the readers of this book get from it?
So I never imagined that I would be an author. The books that I've written were all because I was looking for a book. I was looking for a resource and I couldn't find it. And as you said, Smiley, when we don't see it, right, we make our own table. When we don't see the book, we create our own book. Like, we're not going to wait. Who are we waiting for? We are who we're waiting for. And so these books, including the most recent one, was I want a book with women of color who have won. And from the podcast, luckily I started that, there were so many themes, right? I can tell you we're the bomb because I've heard it so many damn times. I'll do an initial consultation coaching session. They're like, I just don't think I'm good enough. I'm like, oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Well, yeah, it was programmed for you to feel that way. Of course you feel that way. When people are like, you don't know if you're not enough, you're not ugly, you're ugly. Of course you're going to feel that way. Yeah. So let's just unveil it and be like, that's bullshit. Like, it's not true. And here we go. Let's get the themes. You're not alone. Debunk these themes, these myths, and actually show that you can overcome them. Let's overcome them faster together. So that's the book.
Love it. Love it. As I hear that, I think about how important it is for, like Smiley said, our daughters to have these tangible role models, whether, it's someone that they hear about or learn about in a book or through social media, these tangible role models that say, hey, you are enough. You have everything you need. So that when they get out into the world, they kind of have this Teflon vest on where they're not impacted by the things that we were impacted by, right? So I love the fact that you have the podcast. I love the fact that you have these 3 books out, actually. The other 2 books, for those that are listening, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the other 2 books are Native Americans Who Inspire Us, and I'm not going to get this word correct, but don't laugh at me as I try, okay? But Balik Bayan, a Filipino homecoming.
Okay. So Balik Bayan is a compilation of short stories about when I went back to the Philippines and I rediscovered my homeland. And so Balik Bayan means coming back to the homeland. And it's
Ah.
important. It's related to your earlier comment about our daughters having Teflon and knowing that they are not seeking love and approval from outside because they're not going to get it, and instead sourcing from within. Even as
Mm.
much as our fathers love us, I know from deep inside I am loved and worthy. I love myself and I know I'm worthy of all things in the world. And so that's how we can protect ourselves, is to know that that is from within and stop searching for it and to just show up. We spend so much time wasting on like, oh, does Smiley think I'm okay? Does Trey think
Mm.
I'm okay? Does a white man think I'm okay? I'm like, I'm
Mm.
okay. I'm okay. So whatever they think of me, I'm not gonna be able to control that, but I'm okay. I'm
Mhm.
awesome. So I want to say that first. And then second, these books, there's a the first book, children's book that I wrote is called Asian Americans Who Inspire Us. I had read when I was growing up, I don't know what you were reading, but I was reading Sweet Valley High. It's about two blonde twins, blue eyed, and they were
Mm.
popular. And I was like, I want
Mm.
to be
I
blonde
wanna
and
be
blue
like
eyed.
that.
Yeah, I
Mm.
was like, please be blonde and blue eyed. Why do I look the way I do?
Mm.
And I have two kids now. And I said, oh, hell no. We're not going to be like wanting to be blonde and blue eyed. We are brown and proud and we love like this is gorgeous. And so I did not see those books. And that's why I created Asian Americans Who Inspire Us, because there are so many. It's hard to narrow them down. So let's make sure we know about these people. There's also Latin Americans who inspire us, Native Americans who inspire us. We need to know about these brown people who are rock stars, who are ordinary people, just like this podcast, ordinary people doing
Mm.
extraordinary things. We need to uplift those stories. We need to go back to our homeland, return to ourselves, find strength, and not assimilate. Yes, learn the game, but be ourselves, love ourselves. And so that's like the whole theme of all of it, is that we are enough, and our culture, our heritage, all of that helps to find strength so that we can have the Teflon for the life's journey.
I love that. And Analiza, your message is so it's empowering, it's impactful. It's something that, everyone can learn from. For those that I know you do coaching as well. As I was thinking about all that you do, I was thinking about that's a good title for your autobiography might be, yeah, I do that too. Because you do so much. I do that too. But for those that are interested in receiving coaching from you, what's the best way for them to connect with you to sign up for a spot?
You can go to my website, analizawolf.com, ANALIZA Wolf, WOLF.com. Also, just reach out to me at Analiza at analizawolf.com. You can follow me. There's different social media handles that the team will include, but it's just even to just meet me and have an initial consultation, because there are so many resources out there I'd love to support, but let's just make sure you know you're not alone.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
before we
We'll add
before
that. We'll add that to the show notes for those that are listening. Your contact information will be on the show notes.
and two things before we move into the final four. Is there any age? Because when I'm listening to you, I would love for my daughter just to hear you or to speak to you, and I'm going to have her look at your Instagrams. But with your coaching, is it age sensitive? Is it mostly corporate women, or do you speak to anyone, or teenagers, or just someone to see someone as amazingly awesome as you are and say, you know what, I want to strive to be like Annalisa or someone that's in her book or something.
Smiley,
So
just go
that's the
ahead and
first
ask her
question.
for a coaching session. Smiley, why are you trying to hide it? Just ask her for a coaching session. I'm
I
going
want it
to.
for I want it for my daughter. I want it for
I
my
want one for
daughter.
myself. I want one for me.
She only works with women, not Dre. She works with women.
Put on a wig. I'll put on a wig.
There, I'll come and watch that one.
So I focus on women of color, but I mean, however it can be helpful. I do coach white men as well, and because they're trying to, think about their mindsets, overcome their own issues, and be better leaders. Especially, I also have black males, so As much as I support women of color, and yes, Smiley and Dre, your daughters, please have them talk to me. I do have younger clients as well. It's about, let's just get clear about our enoughness and our own beauty and strength, and then be ready for the battle outside. Because I think we need to get clear on how it's all set up. And so that's the book, that's the podcast, that's coaching with me. I absolutely am here to serve.
Awesome. I know we've splattered you with a lot of questions, but before we get into the final four, is there anything that you want to share that we didn't ask you, or it's like, oh, I wish these guys would have asked me this, or just anything before we move into the final four?
Okay, I love this, and I'm going to end here, which is, we're talking about race and gender, but we are all sorts of things. Dre, you said it, and yes, that too, because I'm also a mother. I'm also, regaining my connection to God, thinking about sexuality, thinking about all the dimensions of ourselves, as well as healing. We talk about the technical pieces. How can I be a better leader, be a better parent? But that journey requires so much self-love, and the healing journey, whatever that modality looks like, we need to invest there too. And so I would end with, as we look to change the world, let's make sure we source ourselves and we heal some of the things that we maybe experienced as children, we experienced from the society we live in. And so spend time, please, healing.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. So the first final four question is, what is something that never fails to make you laugh? I mean, tears coming out your eyes and you're bending over. What is that something that just makes you laugh 100%?
My husband dancing. It's the most terrible thing. It's actually what got my attention. We met in business school on a trip, hiking, and afterwards we were partying in Las Vegas, and it was so bad. I was like, oh my God, he looks like he's having a seizure out there. Who is he? That's so bad. It was so funny and bad. Yeah.
You know he may listen to this podcast, or does he know it?
It's not, hey, Smiley, it sounds like he might already know that he's not the best dancer. It probably won't come as a surprise to him.
But it was effective because he got hurt.
Yeah, it worked.
So
it
worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
If he knows what I know, he'll keep dancing like that.
It was his love dance.
That's right.
Awesome.
The next question I have for you, what's the best compliment that you've ever received?
The best compliment I've ever received is a healer telling me, you're here to heal generational trauma. And It's you. All that you've survived and all that you stand for, all the work that you do, you're ready. And that's the work. And you can do it.
Love it.
Here's a third final four. Who would you want to shadow or trade places with for 24 hours, just for the full day, whether alive or dead? Who would you want to just shadow for 24 hours, a day of their existence?
I will pick someone who's famous, Oprah. And the reason that I would pick her is because for all that she's done for her community, us, I wonder what that's like for her, and what it means to put out all her things, all her stuff into the world and still show up. How does she do it? Could I lean more into it? What does bravery look like? It's a beautiful story and all that she's overcome. So I'd love to follow her.
Okay. And the next question is, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
So the biggest risk I've ever taken is, I would say, it feels like every day where I do something scary and I'm able to just step into the discomfort. And I actually think that comes from, I'm going to give a story from that crazy husband dancer. We go on these trips together, adventurous trips. And one time, and we surprise each other. And so he surprised me with a trip. I didn't know where we were going, got to JFK in New York, and we headed to Oman. And I use this because I didn't even know where we're going. We're driving to the desert now, and we're pretty adventurous families, same pack list of camping, all these supplies. And he says, we're going to go into this ravine. We're going to climb in. As long as the weather holds, we should be fine. And there's clouds coming. It looks like a storm. He's like, we got to rush through. It's basically a repelling version. There's no, I mean, he's like, I found it on the internet. I guess it should be fine. We have to just jump into this ravine. It's like 30 feet from a cliff. We hiked in for 8 hours, jump in, and then we have to hold our breath. And then once we get to the wall, swim through the water, and then we'll hit an opening underneath the mountain. Anyway, it's insane. And yeah, he's like, I was like, where did you read it? He's like, some blog. And it was pretty specific though. It said this is the tree that we need to jump from. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even see the bottom. And I use this example because I remember I was like, I just don't think that's safe. I just don't think a vlog is safe. I can't see the bottom, and then we're supposed to hold our breath, and then it's supposed to get to like an opening. And he's like, just trust. And I remember being like, jump. I can do this. And I did. And I held my breath and I swam through, and then it opened up. And I use that example because so much of life is that we leap and the net will appear. Often we don't see the net. We just trust. We just show up. And these types of crazy sports adventures, that is what life is. There's no guarantees, but if we don't jump, well, then we're stuck on this cliff. We're stuck at JFK. We're stuck where we are at home. It requires a sense of trust, adventure, and seeing that like life is the journey. And so keep jumping, keep risking. Like that's scary, but then for the next time I can do it.
Carpe diem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seize the day. Seize the day. I love that. I love that.
Wow. Analiza, this has been most informative, most inspiring, extremely motivational. And I just want to thank you for sharing your words, your wisdom, your experiences, and just your time with us. It's been phenomenal. As you mentioned earlier, ordinary people, you're an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things. So thank you for being here on the podcast.
Thank you both. I so appreciate this opportunity.
I'm looking forward to the autobiography.